Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 6th community meeting of the Robson Arena project. I just want to ask, how many people have been to the prior meetings, any of the prior meetings? Very good, pretty good show. Did you notice I stepped up on the stage this time without falling? I just want to go on record. All right, I'm Lisa Bachman, and we've been brought on by NES, the project team, to help put on these public meetings and do the public outreach and the public communication. So we appreciate you being here. In a minute, we will get into the meeting, but before we do, we're going to start off with Ryan Tiefertiller from the city, and Ryan is going to walk through the public, the entitlement process for this project. Ryan.
All right, thank you. My name is Ryan Tiefertiller. I am the city's urban planning manager in the city's planning department. Like many of you, I've been at, I think, all 5 of the previous meetings for this, but typically I've just kind of sat in the audience and taken it all in with you. My role for this project is that I'm the city's planning manager, or the project manager, reviewing all the entitlement applications that come through the city's planning department. I also will be analyzing the applications using our standards and criteria and making a recommendation to the city's decision makers for this. The point of tonight's meeting, we often have neighborhood meetings like this, city-initiated neighborhood meetings for projects that have a lot of community interest. Obviously, just based on the number of meetings we've had for this in the past, but also given the location and the context and the details of the project. We recognize a lot of interest in these applications, and so we wanted to make sure that all the stakeholders had the information available, had accurate information available, and had the opportunity to ask questions or express concerns about the project. We also want you to know how you can submit more formal comments. In the agenda that hopefully you all picked up, there is my contact information, I think a couple different times, my email address. I also left a number of business cards at the sign-in tables for you to take. Please, if you'd like to submit comments, whether those are supportive or whether you have concerns, please send me an email. All those comments will be made an official part of the record. They'll be part of the file. They'll be made available to all the decision makers, including ultimately City Council, so that they can review through all those comments as they deliberate and make their decision. I am going to turn it back. The bulk of tonight's presentation will be Lisa and the college and their architect and their whole planning team to talk about the project. I know, obviously, many of you have been at a number of these meetings already, but I did see a number of folks that did not raise their hand. And so this might be the first opportunity that some folks have had to really learn about the project. So I apologize if some of this is repetitive to some of you, but we want to make sure everyone fully understands the project. Just briefly, a little bit of context and process-related information. The site in question, as you all know, is just right over the next block over between Tejon, Dale, Nevada, and Cache. The site is within what's called the downtown form-based zone. That's kind of a unique zone district that was established in 2009 and applies to pretty much all of downtown Colorado Springs. This site, actually Cache, is the northern boundary of that zone district. The zone was created to allow for higher density mixed-use projects. Previously, we had a type of zoning that really required the separation of uses. Residential uses in one area, commercial uses in another area, office uses in another area. In a healthy, successful, vibrant downtown, we really want a mix of uses all on one property. The establishment of the form-based zone did require, though, that a project like this, a large arena, does require a conditional use. So that means it has to go through an entity called the Downtown Review Board. The Downtown Review Board functions largely like a planning commission or board of adjustments within the form-based zone. The couple other context-related items is the site is within the Colorado College Master Plan. It's on the very south edge of that master plan. as well as within the Experience Downtown Master Plan. That's a master plan that was adopted by City Council in 2016, and this site is within the very northern extent of that plan. Lastly, the other large-scale planning document that we will consider for this application is Plan COS. That's the city's comprehensive plan. It was adopted early this year, and it has some higher level goals and priorities for the city as a whole. As I mentioned, there are 3 applications. The first is the conditional use development plan, and I'll let the project team give you the real details, but the plan does show a roughly 3,400 seat stadium with supporting facilities, street level commercial space, and an attached 326 stall parking structure. And as I said, that does require conditional use from the Downtown Review Board. The second application is a minor amendment to the Colorado College Master Plan. While the existing master plan did show a hockey rink on this block, there were a number of project elements that didn't comply or weren't entirely consistent with the master plan. So concurrently to the conditional use, they've proposed to amend that master plan to show the details of the proposed arena, as well as 2 very related future projects to construct some additional surface level parking a block or so to the west, and to establish a new tennis facility farther north on the campus. The third application is a right-of-way vacation. As many of you probably know, most of the blocks in this area do have a public alley bisecting the block, including the subject property has a north-south alley that connects Cache to Dale. The application obviously requires the vacation of that alley. That would be an application where the city council can authorize that publicly owned right-of-way to go back to the adjacent private property owners. There is a fourth application that we had actually hoped to be submitted prior to today, but it should be submitted within the next couple days, and that's a subdivision plat to simply establish one lot for the entire 3.5 acre block. That is an administrative application that does not have to go through the Downtown Review Board or City Council, but it's also very simple, straightforward, create that one block. All 3 applications are currently in what we call internal review stage. So we've received all the applications, we've put it all on the city's website, we hold meetings like this. All those details have been sent out to a number of city agencies, utilities, traffic, stormwater, the fire department, police department, parks and rec, local school districts. All sorts of internal agencies review those applications and provide comments back to me. Within the next week or 2, I'll be taking all that input from all those entities, as well as my own input based on review of standards and criteria, and issuing a review letter. Like I said, that should be done within the next week or 2. Once that letter is done, it will be put on the city's website. So if you guys utilize that link through our LDRS website, it's on the city's planning department page, and type in Robson Arena, you can get all those files, review all the documents, submittal documents that have been submitted to the city, including the traffic report, drainage report, the plans themselves, and you'll also be able to see that review letter within the next week or 2. During this internal review stage is when the public can provide input. You can do that via today's meeting, but also, and probably more importantly, via emails over the next week or so. All those emails are provided to the applicant, and as I said before, they will be included to the decision makers as well. After that review letter is issued within the next couple of weeks, the college and their consultants will be taking those comments and revising the plans to address as many of those issues as possible. And some of those may be very technical issues like clarity on the plan or utility-related issues, all sorts of things. But they also could address or respond to some of the stakeholder comments. If they get comments about architectural detail or landscape or parking or whatever it may be, that is an opportunity for the applicant to respond to those issues and make that resubmittal. When that resubmittal comes in, we'll send it out again. It'll be made available on the city's website, and then it'll go through another round of reviews. After most of those technical items have been resolved, the project will be scheduled for an agenda at the Downtown Review Board. We expect that to be early November. although that's subject to how quickly they can respond to the technical issues. And then after the Downtown Review Board meeting, it'll be forwarded on to City Council. That will likely be in early December. At both of those public hearings, Downtown Review Board and City Council will be sending out an additional round of postcards. There will be posters displayed on the site, and an email will go out announcing those public meetings. And obviously, the public is welcome at those meetings, and there is opportunity to provide direct verbal input at those public hearings. If you have any questions or concerns in the meantime, as I said, my email address is on the agenda. My business cards are out front. I'd be happy to chat with you or sit down with you, try to answer any technical questions or policy questions or process-related questions. Whatever kind of information you need, I'll do my best to try to get it to you. With that, and I guess lastly, after the applicant gives their presentation, talks more about the project, I'll be available. There are a number of other city staff members in the audience as well that have been involved with this project on parking-related issues, traffic-related issues, etc. So we're all here to try to answer any questions if they come up during the question and answer period tonight. With that, I'll turn it back to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, just a couple quick housekeeping. You should have an agenda, and also we have a project fact sheet at your on the way in. If you didn't get one, there's some right up at the top. That may answer a lot of questions, provides a lot of details about the project. We are videotaping tonight, as we have done with all the prior meetings, and we will put that on the college project website. I've also got Carolyn taking notes up here, and so let's get going. Let me quickly walk through the agenda. I'm going to explain the entitlement process in detail, and that will be, well, first we'll hear from Leslie Irving from the college, Vice President, Director of Athletics. We'll talk about the goals of the project, and then Chris Lieber will walk through the entitlement process and the master plan. He'll talk about the other studies underway, the timeline, and also how community input from all the public meetings has helped shape the plans and where they're at today. Then the proposed site plans and architecture. We have Adam Davidson here from JLG Architects. He's been at the prior meeting, so he'll walk through the site and the plans and the architecture. And then we have Chris Lieber and also Lyle DeVries from FHU. We'll talk about parking and traffic. And then I'll talk about, at the end, again, how to continue to stay informed. So we'll have about 45 minutes for this presentation, and then we'll have 45 minutes for Q&A. I haven't had to say this at any of the other meetings, but please hold your questions until the Q&A. Don't shout out from your seats. Enable the team to get through the whole presentation. And then we have microphones that we'll ask you to come to. That's so that everybody can hear your questions. So the project team, I won't ask them to stand up again. You've probably all met them in the prior meetings, but here we have Leslie from the college, also Chris Coulter, Assistant Vice President for Facility Services is here, Rick Green, Senior Project Manager, and Scott Lowenberg, Associate Athletics Director. The consultant team includes Chris Lieber, who will be speaking tonight, myself and my team handling the public engagement and communications, Adam from the architects, for traffic and parking. I mentioned Lyle DeVries and Katie Dawson, also from FHU. Civil engineer Kyle Campbell from Classic, and the landscape architect Andrea Papirski from NES. So with that, I'm going to introduce Leslie Irving, who will talk about the goals and the college's involvement. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks everybody for their time today. I just want to touch briefly on the project goals, which have remained consistent throughout, and thinking about the planning for this building in the context of a college campus and campus community. And so as we think about the key goals, we are looking at elevating the arena as a physical and cultural extension of Colorado Springs and the college, with this being an on-campus facility. Looking to establish and highlight a gateway to campus that respects the adjacent historic neighborhood. Creating a building that connects indoor activities and the outdoor environment that we're so very proud of here in Colorado Springs. Being a model of need-based use and sustainability on the national level. And then finally, creating a Tiger-branded home, Ice Advantage, to support our program and our students. Lisa, you step up.
Great, thank you. So my team and I were responsible for putting on these public meetings and workshops, and I wanted to just recap because I want to thank the folks that are here tonight and those that are not here that have been engaged in this project. It's been extremely open, transparent, but more than anything collaborative, and that's because all of you have been so willing to participate and come to the meetings. So we've had 6 large community meetings. You see the dates there. We've had numerous small group, one-on-one, and homeowners association and community association meetings. And I want to thank everybody that reached out, because anyone that reached out and requested a meeting, the project team was agreeable to meet with and did, in some cases, many times, listening, taking their input, and feeding that back into the project plans. We did door-to-door visits with the properties in and around the site. Meetings with several of the property owners. Against every business, every property owner that requested a meeting was responded to and we met with. Communication tools, we tried to use a variety of ways to reach people. If I miss somebody, and I know there's one gentleman here, I apologize. We try our best to be very broad in the types of ways we communicate. Everything from postcards mailed up front to e-newsletters that went out every meeting that people signed up at the meeting and provided their email address. We sent out e-newsletters. We hope you've been getting them. The college sent out a letter initially early on. We sent news releases to every media outlet of about 56 or so media prior to every meeting, and some of the coverage that we've received about the meetings and the project. Also posted every meeting on the city community calendars, on the college calendar, sent it out to many organizations so that they could push it out through their social media. Kept a call log all the way throughout. So every comment that came in, every email, we logged it into the comment log and kept continuing to provide that to the architect team and to the project team. We had a project website, which is up. This meeting will be every material from this meeting, the agenda, the PowerPoint presentation, and the video will all be posted there, hopefully by tomorrow. That's our goal. And we've had some ongoing fact sheets and FAQs. So just a little bit about the communication. So with this, I'll introduce Chris Lieber, and he will walk through the entitlement process.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for being here tonight. And I know for many of you, this represents several months, really, to bring us to this point. As Ryan mentioned earlier, there are a series of applications that we are making as part of this process and formally have submitted to the City of Colorado Springs. And you'll see the list there before you at the top of the slide. We're going to touch upon each of those, but really spend the bulk of our time talking about the development plan. That's really essentially kind of the meat and potatoes of the project, and certainly relates to those areas that we've received the most questions and comments about as we've moved through the process. All said, I think we would be remiss, though, if we didn't also mention three other studies and efforts that have been moving along somewhat independently of this entitlement and specifically to the arena, but they are certainly related. The first of those is the downtown shuttle study, and that is a study that the City of Colorado Springs has led, and it has really looked at the bigger question and bigger feasibility analysis of a downtown shuttle that would link and connect the Robson Arena, but also the heart of downtown, also the Olympic Museum and the downtown Switchback Stadium that has certainly been in the news. So that's a separate effort, certainly related, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to conversation about parking. Another key study is a neighborhood process that, again, has been led by the City of Colorado Springs and Tim Roberts, who's here tonight. And that's to engage neighbors adjacent to the arena in a conversation around parking, specifically neighborhood parking on public streets surrounding the arena. The third study is one that's being led by the college, and the college is looking here at, with the parking strategy, again, that we'll talk a little more about, both on campus and off campus, how are we doing a good job of making sure that lighting is provided so it's a safe and inviting experience as folks are coming to and from the games. And so, of course, that's off-site, not specifically on the arena site itself, but that study also is ongoing. What this slide really shows is that we are approaching, I guess, the kind of the midway point certainly in the planning process. The first block that you see in gray is what we've been through. That's largely the first 5 meetings and brought us to where we are tonight. In August, we officially made a submittal to the City of Colorado Springs, and that was kind of a turning point and really began the portion of our timeline that we refer to as the city review process. Also, as Ryan alluded to, that also includes moving on to the Design Review Board and ultimately on to City Council. And our hope would be that part of the process would wrap up around December, and that then groundbreaking would happen in early 2020, and ultimately completion of the arena in 2021. You'll hear several terms talked about tonight, and first, of course, is the arena, but we'll also be talking about a parking garage, and we'll also be talking about campus support facilities. Those are all proposed to be on the block that is bounded by Cache La Poudre on the north. We have Dale on the south, Tejon on the west, and Nevada on the east. The area that you see identified here is really located on the southern edge of the campus, with kind of the core of the campus quad being located here to the north, particularly for those of you that may be joining us for the first time tonight. As mentioned earlier, this project has really evolved from where we started many months ago. And I think that's a testament to the college in that they've really worked through this process along with the community, and many of the changes that have been made came as a direct result of that input. And there's a fair amount of text here, but I think it's worth, again, hitting some of the highlights. First and foremost, as many of you know, originally when we started these conversations, the arena was proposed for the south half of the block that I described. It is now located further to the north, and that was largely came from a desire to have more buffer between the neighborhood and the businesses to the south and pushing it closer to the campus. Another important element was to develop a parking plan that focused on off-street parking and not on on-street parking, particularly within the neighborhood. Originally, there was not a parking garage as part of this project, and what's proposed tonight, in addition to the arena, is a parking garage that would accommodate 326 spaces, and in addition, there's another 100-car surface parking lot. The college made a commitment to look at, again, off-street parking to accommodate a sold-out full venue soccer game, hockey game of up to 3,400 folks. And you'll notice that that number has changed slightly from where we are, and that is as the design has evolved, and we've looked more specifically at the number of seats and seating arrangements. We've now got that, have that number all dialed in. But the point behind this was that we wanted to be conservative and look at that sold-out venue to really understand what the full number of parking spaces would be required, and also look at that number from a traffic perspective. So from a parking perspective, looking at 291 parking spaces. Those are existing Colorado College parking spaces today. And really giving some thought to when those spaces are available. And when you think about when the events would take place, certainly the evenings, weekend evenings for the hockey games and the other events that would predominantly happen during the summer and during block breaks, we know that those spaces are available. We've talked a lot about, in past meetings, about shuttle, rideshare, Uber and Lyft, biking and pedestrian access to the games. We've also heard a desire to expand the on-street parking immediately adjacent to the arena. Those are those spaces that, again, are adjacent to the block. And also, a big and important part of the plan is looking at those parking spaces that certainly in the evenings and on weekends within a 6-block area are typically vacant and utilizing a number of those private lots that when office, they're full and used during the week for office use, but when a lot of these events take place, they all are open. And so the college has been in conversations with a number of property owners related to that, and that equates to just shy of 400 parking spaces. A number of other changes that happened throughout the process. If you recall, when we started the conversation, the arena was located on the south half of the block. One of the advantages to that plan was that the 3D Arts building would stay where it is located today. The decision that we collectively came to, moving the arena to the north, necessitated then finding a new location for 3D Arts. And the college is busy looking at those opportunities. Another significant change that original plan allowed for the current master plan, which includes an natatorium on this same block. The plan was to be able to keep that on as part of the program. Once the arena shifted to the north, it became necessary to amend the master plan and look for a new location for that future natatorium, and I'll identify where that is proposed on the master plan in a bit. In order to look at expanding parking, that necessitated, and we looked at a site near the El Pomar sports complex and our sports center, and when we did that, that necessitated moving the tennis facility, which would now be located next to Monument Valley Park over off of Glen, and that again came through this process. We also heard from many of you about concerns related to where the service access would be located to the arena. Originally that was coming off of Nevada and was quite visible from that streetscape, and so one of the significant changes is that access now has been moved to Cache, and there's been a screen wall that has been added to the design. And then finally, a lot of desire for improving the streetscape and kind of the neighborhood presence around the arena. So all of those things are significant changes, again, that came through the process and the discussion. Okay, so first and foremost, the master plan application, actually fairly simple in terms of as a document, but there are 3 key pieces to that. First and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, identifying this block now for the Robson Arena and its adjunct services, which would be the parking garage and the campus support facilities. So what you no longer see there would be 3D Arts. You no longer see the natatorium that was on the current master plan. There are 2 other areas then. There's an existing parking lot here just to the southwest of El Pomar. The idea is to expand that parking to provide additional surface parking that would provide overflow here, obviously, for the arena and for events that would take place. But also we know that there's a lot of congestion and a lot of parking demand in this area. And so overall, we think that's very positive in terms of managing parking and parking pressure. With the change here to parking, The tennis facility would then move here, adjacent again to Monument Valley Park and Van Briegel. And so those are the three significant changes that are showing on the master plan. I mentioned earlier the natatorium. What is proposed is that the existing natatorium here would ultimately, that use would simply stay, so it isn't a formal change on the master plan, but that's where that future natatorium use would happen and take place. Okay, the site itself, I mentioned again, is bound by Cache to the north, Dale to the south, Tejon on the east, on the west, and Nevada on the east side. And the arena, located here on the north half of the block, parking garage on the southern kind of quarter of the block. We have an open space area here. The college has also looked at that as a potential for additional infill or additional development, but at this time it would be open space and provide a buffer between Dale and the face of the parking garage. Campus support, and Adam, when he comes up and talks a little bit about the architecture, we'll talk about some of the uses that are proposed within the campus support facility. Primary entrance to the building would be here at the northwest corner, providing access from the quad and kind of the core of the campus into the arena. There's a secondary entrance located on the northeast corner as well, and the thought is that that would likely predominantly be student access. Along the Tejon Street, one of the key components of this is that it provides a mix of uses and has a strong retail presence and is designed specifically for pedestrian scale. So the idea is, if you think about some of the businesses and retail that extends further down Tejon as you're approaching the downtown core, that type of feel and experience, pedestrian-friendly kind of space, would now extend up into up towards the campus. And so there are pedestrian plaza spaces out in front, room for things like food courts, outdoor tables, umbrellas, and then the scale of the building overall also is comparable to what you have on the west side of Tejon. And that again is very important from a streetscape perspective. You also notice that we are doing everything we can to really emphasize and increase the number of on-street diagonal spaces adjacent to the arena. We think that's important, of course, for events that would take place, but also for the daily use that would primarily happen here for campus support and in some of the auxiliary spaces within the arena. Over here on the east side, we have a service entrance, and there is a screen wall that extends down along this corridor. And again, that came out really from a lot of the input we received from many of you, that this streetscape and this corridor was very important. And we also recognize that it provides in many ways a gateway and entrance into the campus if you are northbound on Nevada. Entrance and exit to the parking garage would come here off of Dale Street. And we've looked very closely at how traffic would move with events and how we would use uniformed officers who are off duty to help direct traffic and control, much like many other events that you may attend here in the community. But it also, this parking garage is very important not just for the arena, but for those times when the bulk of the time when there aren't large events taking place. It also serves as capacity for the college overall. A couple of other things on the north. We've talked about the concept of that downtown shuttle. We're providing space for that here. We also recognize the need for drop-off and access. We're looking at the best place for Uber and Lyft, those rideshare activities. And then finally, ADA parking located here in the garage with easy access out into the campus as well as into the arena and campus support. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn things over to Adam with JLG Architects to talk about the building, both the exterior and the interior.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks everyone for being here. It's always very nice to be back in Colorado Springs, so thanks for having me, and I always try to be here. So before I begin, I know the ones who've been here before, we talked a lot about kind of the whys of the project in terms of design, concept, the narratives, what's really important to this. For those who haven't been here before, I'm just going to really quick go over that before I get into the building. What's really important to understand is that we have some really in-depth conversations with the college about what this wants to do for the college. We know it's for a hockey program, and we want to make sure that the hockey program can compete at the national level, be successful, but what else are we trying to do here? And one of the things that came to be was this creation of a sense of place. How can this be successful for CC hockey, athletics, but also successful for the student body, Colorado College, and also for the community, Colorado Springs? At the same time, how do we find a way to blend into the eclectic architecture of the campus? How do we connect to campus? How do we find a way to break down the sense of scale with such a large building so that it does relate to the surrounding texture of the college and the neighborhood? And so many iterations we went through, and some you already heard of, is that we tried to find a way to bring this closer to campus, move it to the north end of the site, but also open it up, start to layer it a little bit so that it actually resembles a lot of the context of the site, the context of Colorado Springs in terms of the Front Range, and how we have the layering effect there. So we're going to walk around the site here real quick and go to all four corners, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the elements that we help create to try and tie into that sense of place. Really make this respect what is existing, but also accept the new experience of what this will bring to the community and to the college. This one right here is going to be of Tejon and Cache. It's the main entrance to the facility, and it's really all about that excitement, that connection to campus. As you approach the facility as a visitor, as you approach it for other events, really want to see that energetic and that vibrancy that we are trying to create. We also want to break down the scale. And so what you see in a lot of these is going to be a lot of breaking down in terms of the elevations, the envelope. We're talking about areas of glazing and visibility. We're talking about some of the screening elements. So we're trying to break up a lot of the blank walls and really trying to create some vibrancy, whether it be vibrancy that you actually interact with, such as at the lobby here, and actually seeing the activity, or at least from the vibrancy of landscaping and building materials so that it doesn't feel so foreign as you actually experience the space. Again, try to create that sense of space. The other thing we try to do too is really force the tall portions of the volume into the middle of the site. One thing you'll see here is the tall volume of the bowl area itself and trying to push that back as far as we can. Bring your eye level down. And so with the screening elements, which do a lot of actual good in terms of sun screening, but also helps break up the facade and kind of blurs the line a little bit, as you see in a tree line or a canopy when you get to the Front Range. And so doing it in a very intentional way to break that scale down. And so that there is a sense of comfort a little bit as it relates to some of the surrounding context of the site. As Chris mentioned, there's the plaza area so that we have an area to congregate both before and after games, make it inviting. And as you can see here, we're really trying to peel away around Tejon so we can bring that connection deeper into the site, back to the campus support structures, which I'll get to in a second. So as we turn the corner and we go along Tejon, there was the addition of what we call campus support. Campus support is about services for the college, but also about creating some vibrancy along Tejon. We're looking at areas like campus mail as a service, the bookstore, campus health and counseling, the existing Woogland sandwich shop to relate with there. So it's about vibrancy and really extending that through the site down Tejon. And really, again, create that sense of place. Again, not only to be successful for the hockey program athletics, but also for the college and the community. And so what you see here is going to be the kind of the middle of the site right now. So the arena lobby, multi-purpose space, and kind of an extension of that outdoor-wise is all there to support the arena. It's there to support the arena during hockey programs and game day, but also support other activities, whether it be lectures or whether it be other type of functions that not only the college could utilize, but also the community. So really, really, truly make it multifunctional, multi-purpose. And then the idea of stitching together campus support. Really trying to find a way to harmonize this together so that it feels like it's meant to be. It doesn't feel like it's a separate piece of architecture. It's different, has its own unique qualities, but it also looks like it's meant to be together. And I think what's really important about what you're seeing here too is, again, that sense of scale I keep bringing up. Breaking that down So as a pedestrian, you feel comfortable about being there. It's relatable to the surrounding context that's already been present. And we're not trying to create a very cold corridor to walk down. Again, about vibrancy. I think one of the hardest areas that we had to work on was the Nevada corridor. Every building has a back to it. Every building has services, and with the hockey arena, that's no exception. There's a lot of services that we had to attend to, and some of that is not always the best to look at. One of the things we worked really hard to was try and tuck that into the middle of the site. Nevada is a street that has higher speed limits. We understood that. We also understood there's other areas of the site we want to try and create that vibrancy. Nevada maybe is one where we really try to beautify that the best we can in terms of layering. And so the other thing too, and Leslie hit on that a little bit, is trying to create a gateway to campus. And so we're looking at Nevada as trying to do that for us. So what you see here and what we're trying to create moving this forward is the idea of this gateway piece, screening all those things that we don't want to see and adding that layering with landscaping, vegetation, lighting, nice building materials so that we do make it a comfortable setting to go along and really obscure all those things that we don't want to see. It looks complete. We didn't want to look incomplete back here. Like we worked on 3 sides and then the 4th side we let be. We want to make sure it's holistic as you walk around the whole site. The other thing too I think it's important is, again, the sense of scale with the volume, doing our best to work this back into it, and we're working on this continually to try and reduce that volume as we go down. But again, we're trying to create the scale more pedestrian friendly, more relatable along the streetscape. It's a very important thing that we're trying to do on all 4 sides of the site. This year is going to be Nevada and Cache. And I think what we're trying to do here is really provide that other entrance portion and really make it that marquee along Nevada. It also ties in very well back to the main entrance. And so we're really trying to tie the elevations together and, again, break that scale down a little bit, offer some interest in terms of glazing, signage, keeping that really kind of minimalist, and then also really trying to extend the corridor and keep it very clean. But we also want to have a point here that actually says this is an arena, this is a public space, an assembly space. How can we mark that in a way that fits with campus, that fits with the scale, and that idea of tying back to some of that topographic areas around the Colorado Springs, that layering effect that we see at the Front Range and things like that. How can we do that to break the scale down? Also, too, I think the landscaping up front here, making this really a pleasant pedestrian experience. Not an experience that you would occupy, but experience that you would enjoy walking through. And I think that's important. There's always spaces that we want to occupy and really make them vibrant, intentional, but there's also spaces that may not work that way. So we want to make sure we address those accordingly. And so along Nevada especially, and a little bit of Cache here, trying to find a way to make those a very enjoyable experience to pass through as you would going to an entrance or going through the neighborhood. Materiality. I think it was very important the materiality was respectful to what the precedent has already been set by the college and some of the surrounding neighborhood. There is a heavy use of masonry on campus, whether that be stone, whether that be brick, some terracotta. And so as we started to talk to everybody on the college and some of the public input, it really became apparent that we need to try and find a way to respect that history, respect that context, and work it into the building in a way, though, that celebrates a new experience, gives a new language, gives a new gesture. So it's really doing double duty. What we looked at, I'll bypass the site materials here real quick and really focus on the architectural. What we really want to focus on was a very simple palette. A palette of masonry and brick, looking at terracotta as a very signature material, looking at glazing in a way that we can promote views, daylighting into the facility, and then certain accents, whether that be with some metal or other things, but really keep it a very clean palette. Also relatable in color. You look across the street at Armstrong Hall, South Hall. You look at Shove Chapel, some of those examples that are there right now in terms of the textures and the colors they use, and really trying to hone in on that and be respectful of that, but then looking at the geometry and the massing to create that new experience. I think a great example is the glass for the lobby and the glass for the concourse, to be able to have that, those views and that daylighting to really make that seem accessible, I think was very important. The idea of the screen in terms of being very functional, but also being an element that really relates, I think, back to some of that natural elements in a man-made way, but some of those natural elements you would see in the ideas of tree canopies and things of that nature. But make it feel comfortable. It's not like a rocket ship just came in and landed, very space age. How can we find a way to use the materiality to make it feel comfortable and relatable? And so that was what we're trying to work on with that. We are looking at other ideas too for some of the screen elements in terms of what that could be, but it's a very signature material and element to a facility that will make it Robson. It's something that we're really trying to hone in on and work through. This here is the parking garage. So we're getting a little axon view aerial perspective of the Nevada and Dale Street. I think what's important about this is that this is a corner that does have the exposed elevations of a parking garage and service area. You can see here what we're trying to do with that gateway function, the landscaping to really, again, clean this up, make it look holistic with the other elevations. But we're also trying to find a way to make this streetscape very pleasurable and pleasant. Screening opportunities for the garage, landscaping, again, working in layers. It has been deemed to be a possible future development down the road, so we are very conscious of that, but at the same time, it can't just be an open lot. And so really working hard to make sure that is something that's going to be very pleasurable as you live across the street or you actually walk down that street. So these are two site sections to the site, and I think what's really important here is to look at the edges. Again, the sense of scale I keep talking about is very focused on the edge, where we have pedestrians, where we have that activity, and keeping all the tall volumes in the middle of the site. The first one here is going to be a north-south section, so this is Cache, this will be Dale Street down here. Kind of working South Hall is located here. You can kind of see the arena itself, showing the bowl, the club suite level. This is a mechanical penthouse. The parking garage, which is situated in the middle of the site. Here is that green space along Dale, which is that future development site. Dale Street and some of the smaller structures you see across. Again, what we're looking at doing here with some site elements, with the screening application there of the terracotta, is to break the scale down so it's more relatable to across the street. That's what I'm talking about with the edges, to make it more comfortable in a place that we actually want to occupy and not make it seem so foreign as a blank wall. The same thing goes for the east-west section here. Nevada, starting on the east, you can see the arena and the bowl, the lobby space. Here is Tejon and the Spencer Center. And you can see here the idea of these edges being very relatable to the existing architecture that's there. It's really trying to be respectful of that. Break it down as you get there and make it more relatable to the pedestrians and people who are going to occupy the space and make it very comfortable and vibrant to be a part of. The next 4 images are going to be some of the interior shots. And the interior is really about that game day experience. It's about excitement, it's about Tiger hockey, but it's also about making a place that could be utilized for other functions. So here's going to be the lobby. This is the main entrance as you come in. Very open space, very grandeur, energetic, a lot of lighting, graphics. Back to the team store and ticket area, so very accessible for services. Very large, so it can hold other functions if it needed to. I think there's awesome opportunities up here for kind of getting a sneak peek to the sounds of the game. And really it's about that first impression as you get walking into the arena and what you would feel as a fan coming in there, maybe for the first time or maybe for, the 100th time, whatever that may be. But also finding a scheme that is respectful to those other functions. We definitely want the sports branding, but we also are respectful to those other things that we talk about that support the college functions and the community functions. This would be as you walk up the grand stair or come off the elevator. This would be the concourse. And here is when you start to kind of look back and get the views. I think what's really great about this is to look back towards campus, seeing the continuous glazing, the glass that's along the north, and then your first glimpse into the arena itself, and just that energy you would feel as you walk in. It's very clean, it's very bright, it's very inviting. It kind of has that very forward-thinking cutting edge for Colorado College and Tiger hockey. And that's really what we're trying to capture here with these spaces. So here you'd be at the northwest portion of the concourse. You can see you just came up right here. We'll have some great opportunities for graphics and branding that we kind of sprinkle out through the arena and the site. Guest services, and then really just seeing the expanse of the concourse and then the club level above. And how that kind of just appears to float there. It's definitely a very dominant but also effective language to I think, the whole arena. And talking about how we introduce graphics in a way that's just very respectful to the idea of the site. Again, it's about the game day experience, about creating that energy that you want to see there, but also being very open. I think one of the biggest things you notice here that's called an open bowl, an open concourse plan, so that no matter where you are, you always get a sense of the action. So if you're up grabbing something from the concession stand, no matter where you're going, you can always look back and see the game. And so it's a very open, exciting environment, very close to the ice, so it makes for a great game day experience. I believe this is the last image, and again, this is going to be from the northeast, so on the opposite side. And I think what's just really great here is what I'm talking about is really seeing that intimacy of the seating on top of the ice, right? Close to the ice, close to the action, open bowl all the way around. You can see the club and how that really interacts floating above. And then just really the panoramic views that you would see here of campus, and then over here too as well, of seeing the Front Range and Pikes Peak beyond. It's a very unique characteristic for an arena, and really makes it a forward-thinking arena with that daylighting and those views and just the openness. Again, just the game day experience, and that's really what we're trying to capture with this. That is it. Again, thank you. I appreciate the time. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'll be around for questions and answers afterwards, so thank you.
Now I'd like to kind of turn our attention to parking, and I wanted to start really with this slide because I think it illustrates a lot of the excitement, and we think this is going to be a great venue for Tiger hockey, and that the scene that you see here represents the 18 home games that CC would be hosting on an annual basis. And so when we thought about parking, this is obviously a big part of that conversation and understanding what a sold-out event means and really thinking about the time of year, the time of day, and how that parking would then fit into the overall context. We also know that, in fact, predominantly during the summer or during block breaks, there will be other events that are held within the arena and referred to in general as C4C events, but they could be a variety of different events. All smaller in size, but we need to be cognizant of what those events look like. But then also, the vast majority of the time, on a daily use perspective, we would anticipate seeing folks skating on the ice, but likely hardly anyone in the stands. And if you think about those daily programs, whether that's the CC Tiger hockey team practicing or other programs, club hockey that would take place on the ice, or learn to skate programs, that whole suite. That's what this would typically be used for on a daily basis. So being smart about how parking works and functions really every day of the year for a variety of different events is a big part of the parking strategy and our overall parking approach. So in understanding that, there are a variety of things that we looked at. Number one, I guess, and this is one of the perhaps the easy things to look at, is to simply take city code and say what is required of the college for parking based on this type of building within the form-based zone and the square footages for each of those various uses. And the challenge with that is that, yes, it gives us a number, but it doesn't really paint the picture of the amount of space, parking spaces that really are needed. It also really doesn't talk about the context necessarily of the neighborhood and around the college, nor about the various existing and possible future resources, parking resources that could be available. So if you take the square footages for all of those different uses and apply the city code and crank out that math, what it does is it suggests that 215 parking spaces are required. As you know, we're talking about a parking garage of 326 spaces and a variety of other parking measures. So clearly we meet that, but certainly for the hockey event, it doesn't come close to really meeting that practical need. So then we said, all right, let's really look at parking demand. And calculate, well, how many spaces reasonably are needed or required. You'll see these numbers have changed and shifted somewhat since our last meeting as we've gotten more specific on exactly the number of seats and a number of other pieces of information. So we first look at from a daily use standpoint. And again, on a daily use, we're not going to have a hockey game taking place. But we're going to have uses, particularly within those campus support facilities. You do the math behind that, and you end up with approximately 86 parking spaces. And I would also point out that the vast majority of these uses are uses that already take place on the campus. They already have a health and counseling office. They have the student bookstore. There's Wooglands is already there. So there are already those functions that have parking demand, and those are being located here to this place. So that paints one picture. Another important piece of that is then looking at a sold-out event. That's the other extreme, if you will. And based on the 3,400 seats and kind of a range of student attendance, we think on the light end, if you will, somewhere around 230 some students. But I think that certainly the college is looking towards, and we think given its presence here on campus, those numbers are going to be more towards that 500 range. We wanted to be conservative, so our numbers are based on 238. Why is that important? Because students are going to be walking to the games as opposed to driving to the games. So the non-student attendance, you can do the math, 3,169 attendees. Looking at 95% mode share, automobile share. Those are folks arriving by automobile, represents just over 3,000. FHU, and you'll hear from Lyle in a little bit, has done a number have looked at studies that have been done across the state, other types of similar events. And they know on average that we have about 2.7 individuals that arrive by car. So I'm kind of working you through the backside of the math. But what all of that means is we have a total parking demand for those 18 sold-out events of 1,215 spaces. And of course, that also equates to a need for ADA spaces. So we're tracking those and included that within our application. Also, you need folks there to take tickets, to work concessions, staff, coaches, and that equates to another 100 cars. So I missed that earlier, but that's what gives you your total of 1,215. So we have this big range. Majority of the time, 86 cars, but for those larger events, pushing 1,200 vehicles. So then you look at the other side of the equation. We talked about parking demand. And then we focused on parking supply. Realizing the context that we have, and if you think about other arenas, or if you go up to the Broncos game, the neighborhood around that stadium is a big sea of parking. We recognized early on that is not conducive for this environment. So we really looked at a dispersed approach to parking. And there's some advantages to that. Number one, what it does is that it takes that traffic that is generated. If you're leaving a large event and everyone's coming out of the same parking lot at the same time, you know what those delays can sometimes look like. On the other hand, if you take those parking spaces and you do a good job of communicating where those spaces are, and you disperse that throughout the campus, and I'll walk through a number of sites. What that means, folks are, as they're leaving the stadium, they're walking to those parking lots, to their car, and they're leaving at different times, at different intervals, and that has a real positive effect on decreasing the big ramp up in traffic that you see with those larger lots. It also gives us the ability to utilize a lot of existing parking spaces, which we think is smart from an environmental standpoint. We think it's just a good use of collective resources. And so that's why we are proposing a parking garage of 326 spaces on the site. We've looked at the amount of time that it takes to get in and out of that parking lot and studied that closely, and we think this is the right size for the context. Existing campus lots, knowing how those lots turn over, and what I mean by that, certainly there are students that are parking and are there 24/7, but on the other hand, we also have a lot of faculty, staff, that certainly on Friday and Saturday nights, those parking spaces are turning over. They're becoming available in the evenings. We want to take advantage of that and have looked carefully at those various parking lots And we believe that 291 is a reasonable and conservative number. We've had a number of questions about, well, what all are you including within those parking lots? They're represented, a little hard to see here on some of the yellow polygons that you see, but I want to also stress that we did not include, and very deliberately did not include the Fine Arts Center parking, because we know that there are events that take place at the Fine Arts Center and that there could be significant overlap. We also did not include the Armstrong lot. If you look at the master plan today, there's a proposal for that at some point in the future to be a pedestrian plaza. Well, not day one. We recognize that that is available parking, but because it's shown on the master plan, we chose to be conservative and did not roll that into our supply number. As I mentioned earlier, the master plan includes an additional 100-car surface lot, and that would be located next to El Pomar Sports Center, and representing, again, 100 spaces. The college has been in conversations with private property owners that have parking lots that are open up in the evenings, and that represents about 390 additional spaces. The on-site parking, I talked about the diagonal parking immediately adjacent, so on Tejon, on Dale, and the parallel parking on Nevada equates to the 64 spaces. And then early on, we've talked about additional parking capacity in downtown. And while truly there are literally thousands of spaces, we don't know that that's reasonable. We're going to get everyone parking there. So we've looked at a more reasonable number of 170 spaces. So if you add all of that up, you end up with 1,300 spaces that meets the demand of about 1,200 total spaces. Another very important point, we have not included, although we counted and carefully looked at availability of on-street parking, particularly within the 6 blocks within the form-based zone south of the arena site. So this is the arena site. If you look at these blocks highlighted in red, the count that we determined when we counted these during hockey season last year, there were 287 spaces that were available. We've decided not to include those in the numbers, partly because we anticipate that we know there are conversations taking place between residents and the city, and that some of those spaces may become parking permitted, and also the college has said we want to find off-street spaces to accommodate games. Okay, great. So at this point, I'd like to kind of shift. Obviously, parking and games also relate to traffic, so I want to invite Lyle DeVries with FHU to come up and talk a little bit about the parking analysis.
Well, it is certainly true that where there is parking, there is traffic. So it's the traffic side of the equation that I'll focus on here for the next few slides. We've taken in the traffic impact study an approach of evaluating how the parking supply will translate to vehicle trips. So how will people in cars make their way to and from these games, handling that influx at the beginning and the egress at the end of games. So one of the first steps in assessing that is looking at the directional distribution of trips to and from the arena on a game night. And again, this focuses really on that game night condition, at least related to traffic analysis. And using some of the tools at our disposal and engineering judgment, we find that it's a accurate or reasonably good assessment to say that about 75% of the vehicle trips to and from the arena will be to and from the north portion. So you see some of the percentages outlined here in this graphic, adding up to about 75% to the north. A big part of that is traffic to and from I-25 via Uinta. The remaining 25% kind of filters to the south in our assessment and is handled via some of those other connections there. So that directional distribution then allowed us to go through and create a couple of plans here. And I'll highlight the inbound traffic control plan and the outbound traffic control plan. There's a lot more detail in the traffic impact study. But when it comes to inbound event traffic control, we sought to identify locations where there might be potential bottlenecks. Safety and efficiency are really the priorities when it comes to handling traffic for these events. So in identifying bottlenecks, we note that close to the arena there might be a couple spots where we'll see some increased traffic and delay. So placing uniformed traffic control officers at those locations is an important part of our strategy. We've shown locations for officers inbound at Dale and Tejon and up at Tejon and Cache. This will probably evolve over time. Early in the days of the arena, I think that there will be a targeted effort to identify how traffic is interfacing with the road network and where the UTCs, the Uniform Traffic Control officers, should best be positioned. But this is a starting point. You'll note as well that in the plan is a closure of Cache Laputer just north of the arena. There's going to be a lot of activity there, a lot of pedestrian activity, as well as game day operations. So that's an important measure for safety and efficiency. Moving into the plan for outbound traffic control, that's a little bit more of an intense pulse of traffic. And it's helped a little bit by the dispersed traffic supply that we've identified for the arena. People take a little longer to walk to some of those farther out lots, and traffic filters out at a more measured pace, kind of a more metered pace. But it's going to be a little bit more intense in terms of uniform traffic control. Focusing in on the parking structure itself, we envision a split exit where people are going one of two directions on Dale, and traffic control at the Dale intersections will be a pretty important part of mitigating any safety or efficiency concerns there. Another important location to highlight is Uinta and its intersection with Cascade. That northbound left, as people are going out to get to I-25, could get fairly congested during those times, and we've calculated some additional delay for that movement. So uniform traffic control, traffic signal timing changes, various measures could be employed there to help handle that traffic flow. So we've got a couple of traffic control plans. There's more detail in the traffic impact study, but this gives you a bit of a flavor of that aspect of the work.
Okay, we're going to open it up in just a minute for Q&A, but I did want to remind everybody that there will be 2 public hearings coming up, anticipated for the dates noted here. The project website is listed there, where we'll put the PowerPoint and the video and the agenda on. And then reminder of where to send your comments to Ryan. And as I recall, September 16th, which is Monday, is what was in the city postcard that they mailed out. So try to get your comments in by Monday.